collages of different kinds of
I'm a
music.
composer.
It's like,
I'm a composer of electronic music, and I compose political music, and I'm still living. The question is, how?
Hello and welcome to the Q&A series of the Norient Film Festival 2021. My name is Christopher and I'm organizing these Q&As, and besides live sessions we have also pre-recorded Q&As, and this session you see is a pre-recorded one. The topic of tonight is sound, noise and place in films, and I would like to introduce our guest for this session. For our moderation, Miriam de Rosa, researcher in film studies at the University of Venice, the director of the film Curupira, Creature of the Woods, Félix Blume, and Raquel Castro, director of the film SOA. That's all from me, and I would give the word to Miriam.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to the directors to be with us today. It's really a pleasure to be able to contribute to Norient and to have a nice conversation about these beautiful films. So obviously sounds, noise and place, it's a really wide kind of area. So there's lots and lots to say, because obviously both your films, even if are very, very different, kind of respond to these terms really specifically. So yeah, this watching the films, as I said, they are very different films, but there is so much that it's a kind of a common ground between the two pieces. So yeah, I will just try to get into both of them, and obviously it would be great if you guys have ideas to exchange among the two of you as well. So let's maybe start with Curupira. Felix, so you are actually there in Brazil, right?
Well, I'm not exactly there, because Curupira, Creature of the Wood, has been shot in the north, in the Amazonian rainforest. But I'm in Brazil, a few, I don't know how many, but probably 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers far from there.
That's great. So the background will sort of inspire a little bit, even though it's not like the same.
I hope it is. I mean, it's probably the same for us, but a few kilometers more.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So maybe a little bit of a banal question, but that's the best way to get into it. How did you learn about these Creature of the Woods?
Well, I didn't really learn about it, actually. It was, I went there, it was already 3 years ago, yes. And I went to this small village in the middle of the Amazonian rainforest in the idea to record sounds. I wasn't there to make a film, or I was basically because I was doing a project in Chile, and I said, okay, I have a break of 4 weeks. I could go somewhere to record sounds, and I decided, probably a bit naively, to go to the Amazonian rainforest because it's a good place to record. And once I arrived there, I start recording sound, but I start recording stories too. And one of those stories was the creature, the Curupira. At that time, I was disconnected, so I didn't know. I couldn't check with Google if the Curupira really exists or not. So the only information I had was from the people living there. And so that's how I discovered she was existing while I was recording the sound of the forest and the story of the people.
That's great. So it's kind of, a presence in the woods, and a presence that came from the stories and from the legends.
Yeah, it came from the place, actually. It was really first recording. First, I started only recording sounds from the forest and birds. And they, of course, it's a very small village, so they took me to different places to make recordings. Told me about specific songs which were interested to record. And then after 10 days, maybe I start not only recording the forest, but recording the people too. And I start with the first conversation with Vitor, one of the people living there. And he told me about this specific sound that he listened a few times. It was the sound of the Curupira. And when you listen to these sounds, and you will get charmed, you will get hypnotized, and it can become very dangerous. So this was the starting point of, was how I discovered that Curupira exists. And I try then the other times I spent there recording in the forest, I try to listen to this creature, try to get charm maybe in the forest by your sound.
That's very fascinating. So it's partially like a legend and partially really something that comes about when you are in the place. So it's very specifically kind of, you know, sort of identificative element of the area, right?
Yeah.
And this sense of place obviously is something that is very much one of the concerns of Raquel's films as well, even though obviously the kind of approach that you embrace for this film is slightly different from Felix, because obviously, I mean, I don't know whether it was the intention from the very start, but clearly you are very much more essayistic in your film, and you have, you know, sort of longer time to sort of unravel concepts that are equally very fascinating, but maybe more explanatory for your spectators. Obviously, the idea of the markers of the place that you can find in sound, it's something very, very present in your film as well. And when I was watching, I was, you know, taking some notes, and there was a bit that really stuck with me, and it was at a certain point someone talks about geography. And says sound can be used as a way into place. And I found it super fascinating. I felt that this was very much applicable to Curupira as well.
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking of answering to this from the example of Felix film, because of this idea. I mean, sound is very suggestive, and it brings a lot to your imagination. This is why there are so many fascinating stories and myths that are based on sound and listening, and you know how it really relates. You are immersed. It's all about immersion. So this is something that interests me a lot, and I also obviously have an active activity, so to say, in research. So this is why this is a very essayistic film. In fact, this is a version of a series I've been working on related to different topics of sound. And so, I mean, the film mixes a lot of material collected over the years.
That's very fascinating. So the theorist in me is now absolutely hooked to this idea of the series. So basically you were working on materials that you gathered and then sort of shaped it differently from the series to the film?
Mean, when you collect, record a lot of material, you can do a lot of films with it. You can do a lot of stories and create a lot of different narratives. So, I mean, there are several topics. I started to research and do films about sound on this kind of essayistic attempt to create a discourse that can be, you know, create and raise conscience towards sound and listening. This is the major motor of this kind of works. So when I started on this, I mean, there are so many lenses, so many people working on sound through different perspectives, and the way sound can relate not only to the people that really work with sound, but with a lot of disciplines. And so this is why the film approaches so many different
no, it's very interesting. And obviously in your film, because it's a, you know, medium full length film, obviously you have like the opportunity to sort of call into questions several disciplines and several approaches. And so there is, you know, obviously the connection to science, and you start off with Genesis, right? So this more sort of spiritual access entry point today, and you use a lot of, you know, very interesting terms that to me are really a trove of key terms to talk about sound. So for example, you at a certain point your voiceover talks about sort of expresses the idea that looking into sound is really looking into how people engage with place and how they relate themselves to reality. And so this idea of engagement, the idea of entanglement, which, if I'm not mistaken, you also name in the film, are very much about, you know, the sort of interlinks between subjects and noise and identity and place. So it's really interesting.
Thank you. And politics also, because I think it's an interesting perspective of sound and the way it changes related culturally and socially and geographically, and it is related, it's experiential. So it's from the human perspective, I think it's we should think more about sounds.
No, absolutely. And I think this idea of engage with sound and be entangled with, you know, the place where this sound sort of comes about is very much, again, retrievable in Curupira as well. Because obviously these legends and these myths and these sort of, you know, stories that you gathered in the community, Felix, I suppose are really sort of testifying how people are connected to the place, how their identity is connected to the past, to the memory of the place, how these stories are sort of passed on from one generation to another, I suppose.
Yeah. For me, it's very important and interesting to know how people listen to a place, to the place where they're living. And actually, when I go to a place, even in this case, I was decided I would like to record the sound of the forest, the sound of the nature, but I always end recording people. And it's, I think, because I'm mostly interested not only in the nature or not in the nature separated from people, but I'm interested in how the people are the kind of conversating or dialoguing with this place where they are. And I definitely think there is a relation, of course, between what you listen, what you hear, between the place where you are and the way you produce sound. You have your own language, you have your own way of producing sound, and you have your own stories too. Of course, everything. I think it's so. I really like to understand more the nature with everything inside in it, and with the humans in it. Yeah. And that's something I'm very interested in general in my work, is this relation between people and the place where they're living in, and how we could find some interesting point. And because of course, if you ask to somebody, "Oh, are you listening?" then it will be kind of complicated to answer, because they will just say, "I'm listening the same as you. I'm the same ears." But of course, the listening is much personal. It's much subjective. It's of course, people are not listening the same thing if they are in the forest, if they are from the forest, or if they are there with a microphone. And in a way, the fact to come to a place with microphone, with a recorder, with headphones, it's a way to say, okay, could you share with me your listening experience? Could you share with me what are the important sounds? What is the sonic identity of your place, of your community? And that's how I get to this story in this case. But in other cases, I will get to other stories, other sounds, other way of expressing this relation between hearing and between listening and producing sound, of being in a place and listening to this place.
Yeah, sure. And so obviously being in a specific place and being part of a specific, you know, soundscape clearly has a strong impact on the one who listens, right? And so it's, I suppose that also impacts very much and influences how these stories comes about.
Yeah. At the same time, I mean, of course, I'm interested in how the people are listening, but at the same time, I'm interested in sharing this listening experience with other people. And so, in this case, the story is a perfect point to make the switch. Sure. And I like to consider myself only like a part of a link between these sounds or this place and possible people listening to it. And just to be like one of, I'm not producing any sound, I'm just capturing sounds and playing them for somebody else, and I like just to be in the middle of this act of listening, as this act of sharing too, because I think the film is an invitation to listen to, as you many see people listening, it's invite you to listen to.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sort of, when you were talking, I was sort of visualizing a bridge, as sort of in a chain where you sort of, put together different realities and different sounds and different identities maybe that could encounter each other, through these stories or through sounds or through noises also. And obviously the starting point. Sorry,
I'm thinking I'm just a part of a chain.
Yeah, of course.
And probably the most important thing, I mean, of course the sound are not mine, and I'm just taking them, and then the listener are listening with his own listening experience too, and then I mean, and that's what was Raquel was saying about the possibility of sound to get your imagination, your own experience, and so any experience will depend of your own background, of your own mood, of your own history. And so that's something that I find interesting with sound and with this story, is like you receive it, but you make your own history. You have your own figure of the Curupira, probably. You have, and it's probably like reading a book. When you read a book, you have different images of the faces of the people, of the character. And I think with sound and with this creature, that's a bit the same processes. You have a story, but everybody has his own history, has his own experience, and that's make it more rich, I think.
Yeah, sure. I love towards the end of the film, there are different interpretations of this magical figure, right? And at a certain point there is an old lady probably that says, I have some doubts about the existence of this, but I believe only what I see, but at the same time there are so many stories about this creature. So it was very fascinating, and in a way was very smart to put that in, because obviously it kind of exemplify what you were saying now. And the idea of obviously using your own background to filter what we listen to allowed me to sort of get back to Raquel's film as well. At a certain point there is this Japanese man that is a super fascinating figure. I want to know everything about him now. And it talks about sound as a layered, multi-dimensional kind of thing. So, and he says that, in Japanese, to listen, to say to listen, you use a word which is the same word to say to leave. And that was very, very sort of telling in a way.
Yes.
It sort of tells about how sound is important for us to live and how we filter noise.
It's how we are.
Sound.
I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
It's related to how we are. Well, Isaki Suzuki is a Japanese pioneer of sound art. I organize a festival in Lisbon called Lisboa SOA, in fact. So there's a lot of sound art mixed with places and people and a lot of things. So Akio came to a performance in this festival in 2016, and I did this very beautiful interview with him, and he has this capacity to talk about sound. Has an IQ, is a very poetic kind of way of, and very visual at the same time. Is so sensitive, so you can understand that when you hear something, it's really all about layers, and it arrives to your ears with a lot of information got in the way. So yeah, I think it's also very fascinating all the interview, and it's very beautiful.
No, that's great. It's amazing you sort of included him in the film, because in a way it's sort of, to me, it was very much a turning point to move from that sort of very poetic treatment and discussion of sound to a more sort of analytical bit that comes straight after. And also I realized when he was talking, it sort of ends is intervention in the film by saying that by comparing sound to a liquid, and he says that, you know, it's a cloudy liquid, and when you let sediment the liquid, then it becomes transparent.
It becomes more clear.
And so and it says obviously the key passage in this is waiting, right? Waiting for all the sediments to just come to the bottom. And that made me realize, oh my God, of course, because sound is time-based. So of course you have to wait, because otherwise waves would not, you know, propagate properly. And yeah, I suppose that's really important, because there's so much that is given for granted into, you know, how we feel about sound, how we filter sound, how our identity sort of immediately, automatically sort of poses a filter, and
yeah, sound is temporal but also spatial, so it's all related to our experience. And I mean, you have this example, for example, with the sound artworks, like sound installations, for example, where you really need to have time. You really need to give enough time. For example, if you go to a painting exhibition or to a photography exhibition, of course you can stare at a painting for hours, but you can also retain this image in a frame, in a part of a second. So with sound you cannot do that. You need to listen, and to listen, this is an activity. If you activate it, you really need to give it time. And this time is all about awareness. So it's not to be stopped, it's only to be aware. So this is presented as an idea that could solve many of the problems we have in the world today. So that's it.
No, that's great. That's really interesting. And obviously time and space are, you know, the key coordinates when we talk about, you know, how do we experience all these key terms that sort of label our nice chat today, and it's very much sort of pertinent for both films, and I'm sure for many others that will be part of the festival this year. There is one other thing that I wondered about, and sort of to me constituted very much common ground between your two works, which is how you relate your reflection, the reflection you present to nature, and how that immediately is something political, because obviously there is a presence of nature as a sort of environment, but that the moment this is entered by someone who listens, there is a sort of potential, you know, political use or misuse of that practice. So I wonder whether you had anything to maybe say about that, or if you thought about this while you were, you know, working on the films.
I think, of course, as Raquel just said, it's listening. It needs time, it's space, but it can be political. And I think this listening go further than sound. Actually, I think the listening is a way of understanding, of taking care, of taking consideration. And I think that's one of the power of sound and of listening. Nowadays, is just to be able to really take this time, to this necessary time, to the listening experience, and listening much more than just listening to the sound, but really in this whole experience. For the specific case of the Curupira, for this myth, but for a lot of other myths or stories, there is generally like some reason for them to exist. Generally, to explain things that we couldn't explain, or we couldn't accept, or that science don't give us an explanation that we could accept. So there is a myth. There is something to that appears to feel these things that we cannot understand or we cannot accept. And in this case, there is of course a lot of different interpretation of the Curupira, but one of the interpretation is this idea of that this creature is taking care of the nature, that she's like the mother from the forest. Yeah. That if you can take what you need from the forest, but if you take more than what you need, if you want to get rich by the forest, if you want to get more than what you need to eat, then she will appear and she will be this kind of punishment for you. And that's something I find very interesting. This could be like a reason of the Curupira to be. It's just she's taking care and she's doing this balance between the use of the forest and at the same time the protection of the forest. And actually most of the people living in the Amazon rainforest, they're taking care a lot of the forest. They only take like a small part of the forest for the culture, for the agriculture, and that's always living. And it's not about ecological minds. It's not about like they don't actually even know about political point of view, but they just make it in an idea of respect of the place where they're living. And it just makes, it's just like this, and it's always been like this, and they're doing it. So yeah, I think this sound and nature are very related. And when this idea of nature, where the nature is not on one side and we are in the other, I think we are part of it and we are in the middle of it.
Yeah, and perhaps that should be what politics is about. I mean, without going too much into that, but sort of really balancing and making sure that resources are respected on the one hand and distributed on the other. It's very much about care and probably, I don't want to sound rhetoric in any way, but the fact that we're having this online and that the festival cannot happen as it was planned should probably be a reminder about how much care is needed these days. And I love the fact that you mentioned this suggestion of the mother. So the forest as the mother and Curupira as a sort of figure that takes care about the situation and sort of rebalance it when it is the time to do so. So it's I don't know, in a way, primordial mythic stories knew already everything. It was already there.
I like it very much in this way, and I like it when they told me this way too. And in this way, when I thought it was an invitation to listen, it's maybe an invitation to this listening, to this specific listening. And most of the time we are thinking like listening is like a passive thing. You're just listening, you're just receiving. But actually, I think really listening can be active too. And saying, you're listening and really listen. It's already an active. It's something active, and you need energy, you need time, you need. And so I think at this point, when you're actively listening, then it's become very close to politics, to taking up.
Absolutely. I think so. And in fact, it's very much active. Because if you truly listen, you need to be very receptive in a way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's built up with this receptivity.
Yeah.
It's also, I mean, listening is paying attention to someone or to something or to a situation. And this is fundamental for action. So, I mean, if you don't pay attention, you lack some ethics in your action, I think. That's transversal to any crisis, to the ecological crisis, to the urbanistic crisis, for example, the situation with relating with nature in cities. It's, I mean, for example, with the noise problem, the noise issue that has been, eliminating a lot of urban species and a lot of urban natural habitats. And so this is a problem. And so, I mean, listening to for example, when some sounds are extinguished, or listening to to someone, to a place, to a situation. This is fundamental in your action. And this is a political stance, I think, also.
Yeah, absolutely. And your film dwells upon this aspect. So there is like a pretty long passage towards the middle where you really talk about, sounds that are progressively vanishing, and how, architectural intervention in the city, or how the place is built, really impacts on the soundscape of the areas. Obviously, there are so many examples, and I am pretty sure that with your work with the festival as well, you will have collected a lot of examples around this. But one at the top of my mind, when you talk about, there is someone in the film who talks about, his experience of being in Lisbon around the bridge. And how this impacts on, the
You're
sound.
talking about the bridge in Lisbon?
In Lisbon, yeah. And
Bill Fontana was doing an installation here for a museum close to the river. And this bridge is really, a very iconographic bridge in Lisbon. And it has a very specific soundscape. It has a kind of drone effect that you can hear in many different places. Felix, we did this bridge together when you were here. You know what I'm talking about. So it's a very classic, but usually it's, all the subjectiveness on sound is also because some people can find it has a noise, other people can find it pleasant. So, there are so many issues related to our own personal experience on sound, which are difficult to transpose to a society level. We can try to. It's even difficult. Felix was saying this. It's not easy to speak about sound. There is no terminology enough so we can really say what a sound sounds like without naming it, for example, or what it really makes you feel, or
the fact that what you just said, like without naming it, makes me think of one last thing that maybe I would just throw at you to, close maybe our nice conversation, which is, we are very much used to see things and to say things, and with sound this is not quite possible, because obviously, and this is like a recurrent theme in both your films, there is something that is not apparent, something that is vanishing, something that is sort of, avoiding to be grasped. Exactly. And there is like something fleeting. So clearly this nature of sound, which most of the times comes by opposition with viewing, right, with saying, is probably the most traditional and easiest way to access the debate and the study and the art and reflection around sound. But it is really true, and in fact it is something that taps into the discussion around awareness that you were mentioning before, Raquel. So it's very much about, okay, we're so trained to watch and to see things, and we are very much used to do that in a more sort of aware way, whilst when it comes to sound and to noise, probably there's not training or not equal training or awareness about it. I don't know whether you have any other thoughts on that.
Well, I think there is an important educational lack on this. That's, I think, working or, in many different perspectives on the topic is a way to contribute with something, because there is a lack of education in that matter. It should start really early on. It should start in the schools, because, you know, we tend to believe only in what we see, but, you know, sound is a resource, so that helps you to reach what is invisible. This is being used for, you know, different scientific disciplines, to arts, to many areas, and that's the general idea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose that films like yours obviously raise awareness because they kind of show very clearly that sound is there everywhere, and you cannot. There was a passage where someone says, we don't have ear leads, so you know, we always hear and we're not aware about it. So clearly, maybe educating about this and just passing on the message that this actually happens all the time and everywhere would be a good starting point, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the Amazonian inhabitants have listened to Curupira differently with recordings from Felix. I think that's quite interesting in his film, is that you watch people listening to the sounds in real time, and you watch their own reactions to this, and this is very unique, I think, and it brings a lot. I mean, it probably raised a lot of awareness in those people, I think.
And I think in general, I mean, of course, I'm very agree with this idea that we cannot really describe sound, or we have a lack of words, but at the same time, I think we can really take advantage from this, and it's very good that we are not able to put name, to put words, and still maybe being more in the experience, in the sensitive, or in this reception of the sound, and without being able to describe it. And I think that's of course inviting people to listen. It's a way to make education too, or to conscientize people about the listening. But probably the way that the idea that we cannot really describe it, that it's invisible, that we cannot put words on it, I think it's one of the power of the sound too.
Yeah, and it was very fascinating when I was watching your film, Felix. I was actually saying, I mean, I don't know whether you gave particular instruction to the local community that you involved in the film, but many of them were just caught by the sound and looking, you know, at the camera straight at you. Was just 2-3 of them were just, I don't know, probably wandering around with their mind. And so I tried to close my eyes and I say, okay, if I were there, what would I do that? And I was like, I would totally wander. So I don't know, it's really interesting. And probably those people are those that are most aware of, you know, how to deal with these sounds and probably process them and respect them in a way that is careful enough.
Yeah, of course there are. I mean, and there are so many words and so many knowledge about the sounds I listen, much more than people or even child from the cities or from other places. I mean, there's and knows that much. They have such an knowledge about all the sounds they can listen. And of course, because of in the forest, you cannot see that much too. You can always listen to the cicada, to the birds, to the monkeys, but you don't see that much. So a lot of things go through this listening experience. So maybe there is this education from the nature, or from this listening education, going much more strong thanks to the forest and the sound of the forest.
No, absolutely. And I don't know, I think we should probably close here, and I would really like to thank the two of you for this lovely chat. We probably got to the conclusion that it is not that bad not to have words to talk about sounds, but I hope we can exchange more words about your films and to talk more about this, because that's for sure a good way to raise awareness about this aspect, and also maybe, I don't know, interpret that political activity of listening as it should be.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank
you
you,
very
Norient.
much.
It was very pleasure indeed.